It is time. Welcome to today's webinar on fixing the call trust crisis, brought to you by CCW Digital and SecureLogix. I'm Brian Cantor, Principal Analyst for CCW, and your host for today's discussion. Digital transformations, automation, the rise of AI, globalization. All these trends are very exciting for the customer contact community. They've created a lot of value, a lot of opportunity, but they've also changed the very nature of customer interactions. They've overemphasized that low-touch transactional component and perhaps minimizing our opportunity to really build the ideal human bond. Now, this means two things for us. One, it means that brands that can actually move beyond the transaction and really start to form connections, they're in position to thrive. They're in position to build that true competitive advantage, that true connection that takes them from a brand that answers questions into one that really resonates with consumers. That's certainly an area that we all want to be at. Two, this also means that the phone, the best vessel for actually forming these connections, remains absolutely pivotal. For all the talk about the contact center versus the call center, for all the talk about digital first, when it comes time to build that bond, phone and traditional voice conversation continues to be where it's at and so valuable and integral to our ability to engage customers. Unfortunately, for all the value, for all the excitement, for all the need, today's landscape is placing a bottleneck on just how effective our phone calls can be. Customers want them, brands want to make them, but they're not happening the way they should. So why is that? And more importantly, what can we all do about it? Well, these are not just going to be rhetorical questions. Over the course of this webinar, we're going to be answering them. We're going to give you everything you need to elevate call trust, strengthen phone connections, and take your customer experience to the next level. Now, as a reminder, today's session is being recorded, and you can ask questions at any time using the console on your screen. Without further ado, I want to take a moment to meet our speaker and get going with the discussion. So, Sean, obviously, I started by hyping up the enduring importance of the voice channel, the importance of making calls. This is something I know you focus on. So for our audience who may not know you, tell them about yourself, your company, and really your excitement for this topic.
Yeah, so Brian, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try to match your energy and enthusiasm. I love it. My name is Sean Donadio. I'm the Senior Vice President of Authentication Solutions at SecureLogix. SecureLogix has been in business for over 30 plus years, providing call security and trust to the enterprise, to the contact center. We feel that we do it better than anyone, and we are really excited to have this discussion today. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I've had the privilege of working with your team on so many webinars over the years, and what I like here is that you think about concepts like building trust and elevating security from the perspective of the consumer, from the perspective of the employee, from the perspective of the brand. I think it's very easy for that to be siloed from a great experience, and we know that's when things fall flat. If everything isn't built cohesively, it's not going to work. And I think cohesion, unity, thinking about the big picture, these are all things that matter so greatly to you, so greatly to our industry, and I can't wait to dive in. So before we dive into your content and your recommendations, I really want to establish just why voice is so pivotal and really back up some of the stats that I brought up earlier with some data that we have at CCW Digital. So again, all the stats that I'm going to share are from CCW Digital Research. Many of them come from our consumer preferences survey available every year, but this is really speaking to the heart of what consumers value, what businesses value, and what we need to operate on as we work to elevate security. So first of all, it is absolutely true that right now, phone remains the preferred support channel, and that's across all demographics. It's not just like previous generations love the phone, today's youth are rejecting it. When we do this research, all demographics are saying that when it comes time for a meaningful customer support issue, when they really want to know they're going to get the resolution they want, when they really want to know a brand is going to hear them and engage with them, they believe in leveraging the phone for that. In fact, 66% of consumers trust phone for service versus just less than 40% for email and only about a quarter for messaging. And when you get into areas like social media and chatbots, the numbers fall even further. So again, what that's telling you is for all the hype around the digital transformation, when it comes time for that, when stakes are involved, when they really want to get what they're looking for, they want to talk it through, they want to have a phone call. Now, this isn't just consumers being overly demanding or overly traditionalist. Businesses themselves agree with this. We essentially asked leaders, those who are like you tuning into this webinar, whether you feel that many of these digital channels could be effective substitutes for what you offer via the phone. And in no case was any channel viewed as more than by the majority as an active substitute. You see here, only 38% believe email can do everything that they can do over the phone. And the number drops to 30% for chat. It's even lower for, as I mentioned, some of the other digital environments as well. Clearly, both consumers and brands believe that when it comes time for something meaningful, they want to talk it through on the phone. Now, why is that, right? We don't talk about phones, so we don't talk on the phone in our everyday lives nearly as much. We know that we prefer to text, we email in so many cases. So why is it so critical to that brand interaction? Well, the top driver from our audience's perspective is understanding and clarity. We've seen so much frustration when it comes to, I need to know what I need to know. If I'm going to that medical appointment, what do I need to bring in? When is it happening? If I'm trying to navigate a complex support issue, I want to know that they can hear me. If they're recommending a product or pitching a new opportunity, what does that really mean for me? That need for understanding, that is what most people believe is still best achieved during a voice conversation. Now, we also know that there's other factors that come into play here too. There's a belief in a stronger, more relevant resolution quality. There's that opportunity to make an emotional connection. And what's most interesting perhaps is speed. Arguably because you can really have that real conversation, you eliminate a lot of the frustration, a lot bit of the confusion, you end up with a faster, more accountable, more efficient interaction when you're talking it through. That is really important here, and it shows you just how integral phone conversations need to be to the customer experience. And then what's also really interesting is even when we start to look at AI and automation, so even as we move away from the traditional human-to-human conversation, we still see the idea of voice being preferred. Right now, consumer trust in voice AI is 4 times higher than it is for text-based chatbots. All adds up to the fact that when it push comes to shove, when customers want to get what they're looking for, when brands want to communicate something that's clear and of value, they want to use voice. And if they want to use voice, we have to build an ecosystem where voice can thrive, one where the trust is there, one where the adoption, the ability to make the conversation is so clear. And that's what we need to be focusing on. Now, I also want to bring up here that there are so many opportunities to really weave voice into the support journey. It's not just, oh, when we have a high stakes, serious, medical debate or billing debate, do we need to loop voice in? No, voice can play a role in proactive appointment setting, customer onboarding. It can play a role in following up on a self-service interaction. There's so many opportunities where a brand will want to talk to a customer. Customers clearly want to hear from brands over this channel. So it is our job as a community to really bring these together and make it happen. But for all the logic here, all the clear indications that voice is so critical to both customers and businesses, we know that right now there are trust issues. There are reasons why calls are not happening nearly as quickly, as easily, as consistently as they should. Now, Sean, you have some perspectives here. What is preventing voice from being the channel that it possibly can be and needs to be for our organizations?
Yeah, first of all, Brian, you're spot on. Voice is so critical to the success of organizations for customer interactions, for collaboration, for communication. So enterprises are understanding, just like they have to secure their data network, they have to secure their voice channel. And what's accelerating that is the enterprise voice channel is in crisis. 87% of calls go unanswered today. So that's roughly 9 out of 10 calls from your contact center agents or to the enterprise, to consumers, they're going unanswered, right? Now, you couple that with close to 50 billion in fraud losses over the voice channel, with 10% of inbound calls that are threatening, and you can see why there's such a disruption in the voice channel. Now, the good news is SecureLogix has a solution for all of this. We have the industry's only comprehensive platform unifying enterprise call security and call trust. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've been in business for nearly 30 years, and the reach of our channel has really allowed us to cover close to 44 out of the Fortune 100 have utilized our services. We have over 300 plus enterprises that utilize our call security and trust solutions. But the hair on fire issue right now that we hear from every enterprise is we can't get our calls answered. You need to help us. And why is that? Why is enterprise call trust at an all-time low? And first of all, let's acknowledge this is really counterintuitive to what we would expect when we have these devices that are tethered to our hands. We would expect that outbound call answer rates would be in the 80% and not flipped around. Well, there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, I'm sure you guys have all seen it. Enterprise phone numbers are getting caught up in potential spam or scam labels from the analytic vendors. I'll talk about them in a couple slides, right? If you're lucky enough not to have your enterprise phone number associated with a potential spam label, well, then a phone number comes across. And I got to admit, if you're anything like me, if I do not recognize a phone number, I'm usually not answering that call, right? And if it comes with a caller name or a CNAM associated with it, which has its own issues, again, which I'll talk about in a couple slides, maybe it's truncated, right? Maybe it's not correct. And God forbid a fraudster is spoofing one of your enterprise phone numbers, perhaps to social engineer your customers or to tarnish your brain, right? Consumers, business partners, they just don't trust where these calls are coming from. And we see it over and over again. And there's fixes to it.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why first of all, the stats here are just staggering. I mean, I know that I don't pick up calls I don't recognize, but to see it as 87%, that is really staggering. It shows that it's not just me, it's not just you, it's not just maybe the more in touch or savvy people. It is pretty much everyone. And so that shows you the stakes. But one of the reasons why I was also so eager to start this presentation with the stats that consumers are demanding phone interactions is because it really shows you that you're missing out on what customers want. We all can look at these stats and say, okay, you're a brand, you can't do as much telemarketing anymore. Oh no. Customers may feel good about that, right? You know, they may not want to be bothered at dinner. They may not want to be bothered throughout the day. So barriers to that calls could even be seen as a net good for society. But when you think about all the use cases for phone conversations, as we mentioned earlier, following up on an appointment, following up on a tech support issue that's been going on, just checking in to thank a customer for doing business, letting them know, hey, this is a serious matter. I don't want to send you a quick text. I want to discuss it. There are so many pro-customer, complex, emotionally relevant reasons to be interacting with a customer. And when you don't get through to them, not only does that complicate the support journey and lead to an unsatisfying interaction, it could even get to a point where they're wondering, hey, I thought I was going to hear from the company about spending $10,000 with them. I expected them to call me and thank me and walk me through the new product. They never did. Now I feel worse. So you have real brand reputation damage. You have real customer relationship damage when you can't get through. It's not just about making the salesperson's job a little bit harder. It is really damaging the fundamental support relationship you have with consumers. And we cannot allow this to stand. Now, obviously, you know, I think you have as you started to talk about, you have a multi-tiered approach to repairing this issue, to overcoming security challenges and trust challenges, and really starting to rebuild that relationship with customers. So I know over the next few slides, what you're going to do is walk us through some of the visuals, some of the examples, and some of the explanations of what these different functionalities are and why they're so critical to really elevating customer interactions and elevating trust in our calls.
Yeah, we really do, Brian. We have our outbound call trust portfolio that has proven time and time again to improve customer interactions for enterprises. And our portfolio is made up of 3 services. Now, you could purchase these a la carte, 2 or 3, 3 or 3. I'll walk through each one of them in detail, right? Phone number reputation defense, we believe, is where you need to start. This will help you remove spam, scam labels that are associated with your enterprise name. The call branding feature sounds just like it is. right? We will brand the enterprise name on the device, how you want it to show up. And then we'll also make sure, and this is very critical, that the fraudsters can't spoof your enterprise phone numbers. We have a spoof protection service that we believe is the best in the industry. So when you look at this, the outbound call trust portfolio, again, this will improve your customer interactions. I'm going to share some specific, use cases with enterprises that some, will really surprise you of what was going on. But as we talked about currently, right, if you're getting a call on this device that says potential spam, you're not picking it up, right? If you have a phone number that you don't recognize, odds are you're probably not picking up either. You need a number reputation management service, right? This is ground stakes. This is tip of the spear. Any enterprise that's making outgoing calls, I believe, needs to have this service. You can couple that with call branding, which will definitely increase your answer rates. And the best part of these service is they're really frictionless. There's no network involvement needed. What that means is we have a contract with you. 2 to 3 days later, we'll have your numbers clean. We'll help remove the spam scam labeling. If you want a brand, we'll have it branding ubiquitously across the wireless networks. This will increase your answer rate. This will increase your customer interactions, what it's really all about, which you were talking about, Brian, right? Customers just want to be able to get things done surgically, right? And then we can wrap that with our spoof protection. This is really important to understand. Fraudsters are very good at what they do. They will recognize high value numbers and they will spoof those numbers just to get more call answers. We can make sure that doesn't happen. With this portfolio, our services are great, but where we really differentiate ourselves is with our managed service. So we wrap all of our outbound portfolio. We also do it with our inbound portfolio with a voice security analyst that's assigned to your account, and they will work with you. They'll give you another extension of your voice security call authentication team. And we have seen this to be very successful for our enterprise customers.
So, two things I want to highlight here. One is the idea that the managed service thing is very compelling here, right? Because the truth is that security it's not a few quick fixes here and suddenly you're perfect, right? It's an ongoing journey where you're consistently looking for ways to minimize risks and maximize the level of trust you have from your audience. And having someone who knows the industry, who can consistently guide you, challenge existing processes, and make them better for you, for your employees, for your brand, for your customers, that's going to be so key. The second thing I want to bring up, though, is the reality that as much as a lot of organizations may not yet be placing enough emphasis on their security protocol, their outbound call trust, the reality is that no one is starting from scratch. At this point, you have some degree of reputation. You may already be being labeled as a spam call. And so when you start to work with a provider, you have to recognize, hey, here's the situation we're in. How can we make it better? And that's where I know, Sean, we want to start here. We really want to look at reputation defense, removing that spam label, overcoming existing threats to trust. So walk us through what that looks like at SecureLogix.
Sure. So our reputation defense service will help you remove your spam and fraud labels. What I like to do is make sure that the enterprise understand how are they getting there in the first place. Well, each wireless carrier has an analytic vendor, and that analytic vendor, they actually have their software up in the wireless network. And it's their role and it's their responsibility to protect the end wireless subscriber from spam and robocalls. And the way that they do that is through analytics and crowdsourcing. So unfortunately, what has happened is a good majority of enterprise phone numbers get caught up in these analytics. If they make 10,000 calls on Monday and the following Monday make 100,000 calls, well, that's raising a flag within the analytics. If someone reports on crowdsourcing that, hey, I didn't like this call, that's a negative mark against you. So what we have done is we go out to each one of these analytic vendors. We actually have APIs with all three of them, and we register and vet the enterprise phone number. That's really important, right? Register, vetting them, letting them know who owns it, what they're doing. And then we have a proactive managed service that will utilize several aspects, whether it's screenshots, whether it's honeypots, right? Whether it's the nightly refresh of the numbers of the registration and vetting. And this allows us to move those enterprise phone numbers into a positive reputation state. And we monitor it. And the use cases that we've seen, first of all, healthcare cannot have this more than enough. You talked about it a little bit, Brian, where you have a healthcare company, whether it's a hospital, doctor's office, dentist's office, orthopedic, right, that is trying to have these customer interactions. They want to call their patients, their business partners about test results, about when the next appointment's going to be, about maybe dealing with your bill, about the conversation you want to have with your doctor. Well, the majority of them would call us and tell us, well, we can't get through because when we call them, our number's coming up as spam or fraud. So we've been able to work with these analytic vendors with our real-time APIs, with our managed service, and help keep them clean. In the airline industry, we had a major airline that said, hey, we need to contact our pilots. And also on another phone number, we contact our users that call into our IVR with a callback or missed luggage. Well, those calls going out, especially to the pilots, were labeled as spam. The pilots aren't going to pick up that phone. So being able to register, proactively work with them, with our managed service team, right, has cleaned this up. In certain cases, we will educate them on best calling practices, right? How to make sure that your numbers don't go into those spam and fraud labels. And this has been very successful for all parties. And our customers are very pleased with our service around reputation defense.
Well, if you remember earlier in the conversation, I brought up how it's important that you really think of this as a unified ecosystem, that it can't be, oh, we have our security team and then we have our customer experience people and they rarely, if ever, talk. As you alluded to here, yes, obviously there are false positives, there are network challenges that are general behaviors that could wind you up on a spam list. But the reality is, once you're off that list or once you're not labeled, you still have to make sure your calls are not being flagged as spam when they're getting through. That means that you need the right strategy. So this can't be, let me work with SecureLogix to get my number off the list and suddenly I can abuse it, I can harass customers, I can be too aggressive. You need to really be thinking about, what value am I demonstrating from my interactions? What do my customers want to hear from me? How can I make sure that when they pick up the phone, they feel like they're talking to a trusted brand? And that combination of the technical security element with that customer experience savvy, that is such a powerful 1-2 punch that not only allows more calls to go through, but makes more calls to resonate, to mean something, to elevate your brand and get the outcome you're looking for. Whether that is, hey, there's an overdue medical bill, you want to see conversion rates go up. Whether it is you feel like your customers are disengaged, you want to engage them a little bit more, whatever the use case is, they have to know that not only is this call coming from who it says it is, but that I trust it's going to have value, it's going to be right for me. And when you think about all that together and you have the right guidance from someone like Sean and his team, you're going to start to build trusting calls, not just accurate, like ones that get through. And so I think that that level of trust is so important. And this is clearly a critical first step. But of course, it's not the only step and it's not the only things you do, because call branding is also critical, not only sort of removing the passive negative mark on your brand, but actively demonstrating that trust and building that relationship and elevating that reputation. So walk us through call branding, what it looks like today, how SecureLogix does it differently. And then I know you also have some stats about some positive impact you can trace to your offering as well.
Yeah, thank you. So again, I'm going to start with making sure that everybody understands there's a difference between branding and CNAM. I was on with a major enterprise today and they said, well, our number gets pulsed out every time via CNAM. First of all, CNAM is a 1990s technology, right? It wasn't really meant for the wireless device. It all depends on the terminating switch. Is the terminating switch going to query a CNAM database? And oh, by the way, there's a bunch of disparate CNAM databases. How many mergers and acquisitions have you been through? Do you have the right name? Is it truncated? It's only 15 characters, right? It's not a good customer experience at all. Now, the wireless analytic vendors and the wireless carriers came up with branded calling as a way to improve those customer interactions. It's really a promising way to reestablish caller identity. You're going to get this display of your business unit up to 32 characters, right? You also now have the option to include logo and call reason in that, even though it's a little bit more involved, but we can do that. And it really has shown to improve customer interactions and the customer experience. Again, where we differentiate ourselves is really our managed service. One of the things we work with the enterprise is understanding, like, what is this going to do for their business, right? We deal with a lot of the top Fortune 100. We deal with the automotive industry very surgically. What I mean by that is they had an issue, right? They're mandated by law to reach all of their, customers when there's a recall, right? So we started, where do you think we started, Brian? We cleaned up the reputation of their phone numbers. We definitely don't want them coming up as spam because no one's going to answer that. But then we talked to them about call branding and how we said, hey, call branding will increase your answer rates. And I'll show you in a couple slides in a little bit some direct, penetration of this. But what we're able to do at times is, hey, what's your current answer rate when you're calling out to your customers to tell them about a recall? So we cleaned out their reputation. We put the name of the automobile company and we put recall as the branded call display. And wouldn't you know it, their answer rate increased by over 100% with these two moves, right? These are things that we work in tandem to show, what are the reports, what are the metrics that we're giving you. One of the reasons why we assign a voice security analyst, because we don't believe this is a commodity service. We believe this is so integral to what you're doing as an enterprise. We want to make sure we're taking full advantage of it. And the reporting that we send them out that goes over answer rate, contact rate, success rate, we work with them to understand that and to get the best benefit. So branded calling is really beneficial because it adds another step to reach your customer.
And not only does it clearly increase answer rate, clearly increase trust, clearly increase the likelihood of having that conversation that is going to be so productive for building relationships, but it also signals that that this is the brand behind it. So let's say hypothetically, someone's waiting to hear back about when a prescription is going to be ready. They see the brand calling, they can't pick up the phone at that moment. So you don't technically have a higher answer rate in that situation, but they see the pharmacy called, they see the doctor called, they know it's branded properly. They feel as if they were valued, that they were heard, that the organization reached out. That still could trigger the right behavior. So it's kind of a best of both worlds scenario in that you're not only boosting answer rates, boosting conversions, but you're boosting that perception that you're an organization that is who it says it is, that is trustworthy, and that follows through and tries to make that conversation happen. All this comes together to say that with so much commodities out there, so many organizations that are roughly selling the same product, you're one that puts customer trust first. You're one that wants to get in touch. You're one that calls and follows up when they say they're going to. Whether the customer answers or not, they know that you're a brand that stands behind its value and you're one that's going to build that connection. And the fact that they're more likely to pick up, all that means is you're more likely to have a productive conversation, more likely to take that relationship to the next level, grow lifetime value, strengthen your business. So again, such a pivotal approach and one that certainly means a lot. However, Let's think about the downside of this, right? Once you start to build more credibility, your calls are branded, your numbers visible, that's going to make you a target perhaps for, call spoofing, for other fraudulent behavior. But you don't have to worry if you're working with SecureLogix because you have this addressed as well.
Absolutely. So we are a voice security company at our DNA. We believe you should not be branding your phone numbers unless you're spoof protecting them. Now, there are some obviously caveats to that. If you're, Joe's Garage down the street, or if you don't have high value numbers, then you may not need to spoof your enterprise phone numbers today. I'm going to introduce a term here. I can't take credit for it. I'll give that to our CTO. But there's a lot of naked branding going on right now. What that means is people are branding their phone numbers, and anyone who spoofs those phone numbers, to your point, Brian, the name's going to come up. And how do you think fraudsters and scamsters take advantage of that? This is their craft. This is what they do day in and day out. If they know a company is actually branding their name, right, they will spoof that number and try to social engineer their customer. One of the schemes that I'm sure all of us have seen is you get a text saying, did you spend $1,000, with your credit card? Whether you answer yes or no, you get an immediate call back from the number that's on the back of your credit card. And they'll say, hey, this is the bank calling. We just got $1,000 purchase. Look at the back of your credit card. You look, the number matches up. You feel confident. Now, what if it's branding? You feel even more confident. And then they social engineer you. We have a way to stop that. And that's with our True Call Protection Service. And the way this works is it makes sure at a very high level, right? When an enterprise is making a call, you could see it start on the left hand of the slide there. When an enterprise makes the call, those are the only calls that are going to get through to the end users. And the way that we do that is we have real-time API notifications with the analytic vendors, letting them know that company A is making a call right now. When you see it hit your network, T-Mobile, make sure it goes through. Make sure it gets branded, right? And eventually, when you want to add the logo or the call reason, make sure that goes through as well. And then when a fraudster goes to spoof your number, because we never sent the API notification to T-Mobile, it will be blocked in the network. And this is working remarkably well. We just turned on one of the biggest global banks in the world in August. For the month of September, we blocked over 1 million calls that were trying to spoof their phone number. And we authenticated over 4 million calls. It's because they have such high value numbers. Fraudsters want to utilize that and then try to social engineer and ruin the brand of the enterprise, right? It's like a double whammy. Horrible customer experience, horrible for the brand. Our spoof protection has proven that it works. We've had this in production now for over 3 years. We believe we are the best at doing it because there is some friction involved, right? You need to know when the enterprise is making a call. We need to reach out to the analytic vendors to let them know. This is what we've been doing for nearly 30 years. Being in enterprises' networks, securing their networks. We know how this is done. One of the best feedback we got was from this bank. They have, multi-million-dollar fraud teams watching all this stuff. And when we put this in place after the first or second week, I believe it was, their team came back and said, we monitor the dark web. And one of the things that we saw is that they can't spoof. They're talking about how our numbers now are unspoofable. So they're moving on to the next bank, right? That's the greatest testament we can get that the service works, right? It's ready to roll out today. We know how to do it. We provide end-to-end authentication. And when you couple all of our outbound services together, right? Getting rid of the spam, scam labels, branding the call, authenticated branding, making sure it's spoof protection. This is restoring trust these enterprises that are taking advantage of that have seen it, they can live it, and they see it in their results.
And all this adds up to a finding that I was really excited to see from our market study on modernizing service experiences with AI and digital. So we asked the question, as today's world moves toward more AI, more digital, more innovative ways of communicating, how can a brand best differentiate itself? And you might have thought, hey, it's personalization or empathy or even speed. But far and away, the number one way to differentiate themselves was on security and customer trust. It was in a world with so many different ways to communicate, so many easy ways, as you point out here, for bad actors to piggyback off established credibility and get through. The best thing you can do to show we're a brand you should trust is to build a robust security practice. And I think by following these steps, along with, of course, an overall big picture strategic mindset, you're going to lead to more trust, more security, more respect for customers, and ultimately a better brand. That makes sense in theory. It aligns with survey data, but we're not going to stop there because, Sean, we do want to wrap up as we start to move toward the end of this webinar by diving into that case study and that look at how this was so transformative for someone that you work with. So walk us through those results and what it looked like.
Yeah, so 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, we had the largest global life insurance company come to us and say exactly what I said in the beginning. We're having trouble getting our calls answered, right? Customers don't know it's us, or in some cases, we get calls back into our call center saying, you just called me from this number looking for information, right? A spoof call. So we put these 3 services in place, and through our managed service team, we were able to work on delivering these analytics to them. And before we started any of these service, right, their answer rate was about 39.48%, which is not that bad of an answer rate today, if you look at it. After 2 months of service, the answer rate went up to 57%, which indicates a 44.6% increase in answer rate because we got rid of the spam labels. We branded their calls, and more importantly, we authenticated their calls so they couldn't be spoofed. And we worked with this global life insurance company to say, well, what does that mean to you, right? So they would have more than 60,000 customer interactions because people were answering the phone, right? That they didn't have before. They were able to put a dollar amount associated with, hey, every time we have a customer interaction out of this group, right, the value is X. They were able to get an ROI in 2 months of 268%. This stuff works, right? This is what you have to do to bring back trust into the voice network.
That's so great to see a result like that. So great to see that this isn't just theoretical. It's not just jargon. It's not just hyping a product. It is hyping and celebrating a pathway to meaningful outcomes and real results for organizations. Now, if you know me, though, you know I'm an attention to detail guy. And earlier on, you shared a slide that talked about a variety of challenges for the voice channel. You talked about difficulty with outbound calls. You talked about difficulty with losing money over fraud losses. You also had a stat about inbound calls. Now, for the majority of today's conversation, you've really focused on the outbound element, but I'd be remiss if I didn't give you a chance to also talk about what are some things that are happening on the inbound front and how organizations need to think about those threats and staying protected there.
Thank you, Brian, for going back to this because this is so important because enterprises are having just as many issues with incoming calls, right? 10% of all incoming calls are threatening calls, whether it's robocalls, spam calls, harassing calls. These are just really nuisance calls, but they're making your CX agents and your enterprises very inefficient. They don't need to be answering these calls. We could basically make sure that they don't get through. And that doesn't even go into the fraud calls, right? The TDOS attacks, the call pumping, right? Where they're looking to add to that 48 billion of fraud losses over the voice channel. So as I mentioned earlier, the best thing about this is we have one solution for all of these issues, right? And you can turn them on as you see need fit. But we start with our call defense, our voice firewall, right? As I mentioned earlier, if you have a data firewall, you need a voice firewall as well. And we have this deployed, in 200 to 300 enterprise customers today, right? Where we'll stop their spam, their robocalls. Another, use case that I almost couldn't believe, it was in the transportation sector, so I'm not going to say which one to protect the innocent here, but they told us we're getting so many spam calls into one of our hubs. We just turned it off and let all of them go to voicemail, and then we check the voicemail every hour or so. You would imagine that that wouldn't actually be the truth, but it was, right? So we were able to put in our voice firewall and make sure that we got rid of all those spam, fraud, harassing calls, right? We can also go wider and deeper into who is calling into the call center. So our inbound call authentication service, our Orchestra One service, will give you a risk score with every single call that comes in to your contact center, from -5 to +5. If we know the call is spoofed, hey, maybe it's not even a valid NPA NXX or North American number. Maybe it's not assigned to a carrier. There's a good reason for that, because it's a spoof call. We're going to tell you it's a spoof call. Then you could put policy in place. Well, if we know it's not a good call, let's send it to a voicemail. Tell them to call back with a valid number. Maybe we want to terminate the call, or maybe we want to send it to a fraud trained agent. We really focus on the greens. We want to tell you when it's a good call. If it's a good call, that means you could do a couple things. Maybe it goes right to the IVR. Maybe you only ask one KYC question instead of 3, saving time, making it more efficient, having a better customer relationship. Our inbound call authentication identifies what are good calls and what are bad calls, so you can manage your risk and you can put money back into your call centers, right? And then obviously we round it out with the outbound call trust portfolio that we just talked about. And again, our differentiator really is we offer these solutions with one universal platform. We'll give you a whole solution of full call security and trust for all your incoming calls and outgoing calls. And we have been able to do this with countless of enterprises that show the ROI, that clean up the customer experience and improve their brand for better communication throughout their channels.
Well, Sean, I want to thank you so much, one, for really a strong primer on the state of the call right now. What is happening, why are calls not being trusted, and what can be done about it. 2, I think really showing not only, hey, here are some little cool features or solutions that you can kind of like put in on an ad hoc basis, but instead, here's an ecosystem that constantly simultaneously elevates security, brand trust, and experience value. When you know that, okay, this is a call worth trusting, when you know it's a brand that cares about me, and because of that, you're more likely to have a productive interaction where you get the message you need, you get the support you need, you get the emotional empathy and accountability you need, this is a brand I want to work with. And then for an organization, you can do this all more efficiently. You can actually use your brain power, use your intellectual load on building customer relationships, not putting out fires, not stressing over the call's credibility, not stressing over how you're going to get that call through. So it really hits on all cylinders. It makes your brand stronger. It makes security better. It makes customers more trusting and respected, and it makes you more efficient. That happens because you're taking that universal approach. It happens because you're really thinking about how security and the customer experience are aligned. It happens because you know that voice is so critical. Let's make it trustworthy. And so again, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to all of you for your great questions. I know we're out of time, but I know Sean will certainly follow up with you afterward to get you what you need as far as answers. And again, thanks to all of you for your commitment to not only trying to reach your customers, but doing so successfully and with real credibility, real connection mindset, and real customer centricity. On behalf of CCW Digital, thanks so much for joining us.